Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech, where we blend casual conversations with insightful discussions on the latest in technology and gadgets. You know what's got the tech world in a bit of a spin lately?
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The idea of new tariffs slapped on semiconductor imports. It feels like every time you open your news app, there's some new twist.
Ah, right. That is big news. It could mess with everything from your phone to, well, the AI systems powering basically everything these days.
Exactly. Okay, let's maybe unpack what this actually means. We need a deep dive.
Absolutely. It's a really dynamic situation for sure. And yeah, we should dive into the recent expert analysis. I think Bloomberg Technology had some good stuff on these potential tariffs.
Good idea.
What's fascinating right off the bat is just how much uncertainty this throws into the whole global tech landscape.
Which was already pretty complex, let's be honest.
Totally. Intricate is a good word for it.
Right. So our mission here, let's say, is to cut through the jargon and the speculation.
Yeah, try and understand how these tariffs could actually shake up the chip industry.
Those super complex global supply chains we always hear about but maybe don't fully grasp.
Right, and crucially, whether our next gadget is going to cost us an arm and a leg because of this.
It really feels like the administration's tariff strategy is still being written, like in real time, doesn't it?
It definitely does. The Bloomberg report highlighted that the Trump administration kicked off these trade probes specifically into semiconductor imports.
Okay.
And most analysts seem to see this as, the first step towards broader tariffs.
So it's not just talk.
No, it's a formal process underway.
And this isn't just theoretical, right? They've launched a Section 232 investigation. The justification is national security.
That's the key part, Section 232.
That sounds like it could bypass a lot of the usual trade negotiation timelines. What exactly does a Section 232 investigation mean here?
Well, it's significant because it lets the president impose tariffs or other restrictions if the Commerce Secretary finds that imports are threatening U.S. national security.
Okay, so national security is the trigger.
Exactly. And unlike your typical trade disputes, that justification can lead to much faster action. It potentially bypasses those lengthy negotiation processes. So, yeah, quicker implementation.
That certainly explains the accelerated timeline people are talking about. We could be looking at these tariffs hitting within the next month or two.
That's the speculation, yeah. Which feels incredibly fast in the world of international trade.
For sure. And it's not just the actual chips themselves that are in the crosshairs, is it?
No, it includes the machinery to make them.
Oh, wow.
And even our everyday electronics that rely on these chips.
Everything. I even saw something about legacy chips being a particular focus. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, Commerce specifically mentioned legacy chips. Generally, this refers to semiconductor tech that's a bit older, not the absolute cutting-edge stuff in the newest phones.
Okay, so maybe older nodes, that kind of thing.
Probably. The thinking might be that while these aren't maybe crucial for the most advanced U.S. tech lead, they're still absolutely essential.
And tons of products.
Exactly. Cars, appliances, industrial equipment, a vast array.
Gotcha. The workhorses of the tech world. Now, President Trump seems convinced these tariffs are the key to bringing chip production back home to the U.S.
He does. He's even pointed to recent announcements from NVIDIA as sort of evidence.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Isn't there an argument that subsidies, like in the CHIPS Act, might be better for long-term innovation, R&D in the U.S., compared to tariffs, which are basically a tax?
That's a really crucial point. President Trump has been critical of the CHIPS Act, which uses subsidies and grants.
Right.
He argues tariffs are a more direct incentive, stick, as he put it, to compel companies to manufacture here.
And his mention of NVIDIA.
It's interesting because there was a bit of a misinterpretation floating around, wasn't there?
Yeah, I saw that. It wasn't a $500 billion investment in new factories by NVIDIA.
Right.
It was a pledge to produce $500 billion of goods in the U.S. over the coming years. Still huge output, but
not the same as a massive capital expenditure right now.
Precisely.
It's a substantial commitment, value of goods produced, but not an immediate $500 billion investment injection.
Got it.
However, the president has also indicated a willingness to expedite permits and offer other support for companies like NVIDIA that commit to expanding U.S. operations.
So it's a mix. Potential pressure, potential incentives.
Seems like it. A bit of carrot and stick, maybe?
So the initial market reaction to all this tariff talk was a bit confusing, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Equity markets dipped generally, but then the Philly Semiconductor Index, the SOX, actually did surprisingly well. What do you think the market's trying to tell us?
Well, that initial drop in the broader markets That probably reflects the general uncertainty that tariffs always bring.
Yeah.
Standard reaction.
Makes sense.
But the outperformance of the semiconductor index, that could suggest a couple of things. One interpretation, some analysts are saying this, is that the market might actually see increased certainty.
Certainty, even if it's certainty of tariffs.
Yeah, something they can at least start to factor into valuations.
Yeah.
Maybe investors think domestic chip companies might benefit, less competition, more demand because of tariffs.
Okay. Or maybe some companies are just better positioned.
That's the other angle. The market might be betting that specific companies are better equipped to navigate these changes than others.
But that overall uncertainty still feels like the main theme, right? Especially looking bigger picture.
Oh, absolutely.
These headlines keep triggering volatility, and that recent news from the EU saying they don't see much progress in trade talks with the U.S., that definitely caused another market wobble.
Exactly. Those ongoing talks, or lack thereof, create significant headline risk, market fluctuations. The Bloomberg experts pointed that out too.
Right.
The EU's pessimism just highlights how complex these international relationships are, adds to the nervousness.
So with all this market jitters, how are the actual tech companies reacting? The ones right in the middle of these supply chains?
Well, they are, as you said earlier, kind of the poster children of globalization.
For good reason.
Totally. They've spent decades building these incredibly intricate, super efficient global supply chains, all optimized for cost and specialization.
Yeah.
So any threat to that system, it's a major, major concern for them.
And we are seeing them trying to be proactive, exploring reshoring options, speeding up shifts maybe.
Definitely trying. But you can't just flip a switch, dismantle these huge global networks overnight.
No way. Based on your experience, what's like one of the biggest unexpected hurdles companies hit when they try to shift manufacturing like this?
It's far from simple. I think one of the most unexpected things is just how interconnected the whole supply chain is. It's not just moving final assembly.
Right.
It's the countless tiers of suppliers underneath, each one often specializing in one tiny component or process. Untangling that and replicating it somewhere else, incredibly complex, time-consuming.
And finding the people.
That's the other huge piece, human capital. Finding and training a skilled workforce to the same level as those established hubs, that can take years and a lot of investment.
Makes total sense. And these companies, they're not just globally intertwined for parts and building, but also where they sell, right? Many rely heavily on international markets for revenue.
Absolutely critical. Major revenue streams come from outside the U.S. for most big tech firms.
Plus, they're also cyclically exposed. Their performance is tied to the global economy's health.
Right, so a slowdown combined with more scrutiny on their spending.
Speaking of spending, the big cloud companies, the hyperscalers, they had that massive jump in CapEx, over 50% from 23 to 24.
Huge numbers, yeah.
You have to wonder if that kind of spending spree is really sustainable with all this economic uncertainty floating around.
That's a critical question everyone's asking. While demand for cloud and AI is still super strong, that kind of explosive CapEx growth, it's likely going to moderate in this environment.
Yeah, you'd think.
Management teams will be under more pressure from investors. Focus on protecting margins, showing a healthy bottom line. Big, ambitious spending plans might face closer scrutiny.
So it really boils down to this incredibly delicate balancing act for them.
Totally.
If a company decides, okay, let's bring manufacturing back to the U.S., they're probably looking at, what, a 25% cost increase?
Roughly. Yeah, that's the estimate often thrown around.
But then again, tariffs on the imported stuff could also be 25%.
That's the rock in the hard place. It's a very apt way to put it.
Feels like they're caught.
They are. It's a real strategic dilemma. Onshoring shields you from tariffs, maybe, but costs more. Sticking with global chains exposes you to tariff risk.
And you can't just pass all that cost to us, the consumers,
No.
without demand shrinking.
Exactly. There's a limit to how much prices can rise before people just stop buying or buy less. Tariffs, fundamentally, don't create new demand. They just immediately add cost. And while supply chains will eventually adapt, it's not quick. It's not cheap. Their current setup was meticulously designed over years for cost effectiveness. Undoing that takes time and money.
It's fascinating how this whole situation seems to be shifting the focus, even in the financial world.
How so?
The Bloomberg experts highlighted this increasing importance of geopolitical analysis, sometimes even over traditional fundamental analysis.
Right. That really underscores how much these trade tensions are shaking things up.
Doesn't it?
It really does. When government policy can suddenly change cost structures, market access, for entire industries, well, geopolitical factors become absolutely paramount for investors, for businesses.
And the tech sector, especially semiconductors, it's just such a perfect example. Deeply interconnected globally. You can't just decouple it easily or quickly.
Not at all. It's woven together across continents.
And it's worth remembering, wasn't the tech sector among the first to get those broad temporary tariff exemptions a while back?
They were, yeah.
Maybe there's some recognition at the policy level, like how vital this sector is for U.S. tech leadership, global competitiveness.
That initial decision to grant exemptions, it certainly suggests some understanding within the administration of tech's strategic importance. There's definitely a valid argument, some have made it, that these major tech companies might be considered, too big to be faced with massive tariffs in the long run.
Because they're so crucial.
Yeah, their role in the U.S. economy, global innovation, it's huge.
But there's this underlying unease, isn't there? This idea that policy for this incredibly critical tech sector seems to made up somewhat on the fly.
Yeah, that phrase came up, didn't it? From a former principal chief technology officer.
That doesn't exactly inspire confidence for long-term planning.
It's a very valid concern. The perception of rapid, maybe unpredictable policy shifts. That creates huge challenges for companies trying to make long-term investments, big strategic decisions.
And for other countries too?
Absolutely. It makes it incredibly difficult for places like the EU or China to understand the U.S.'s long-term strategy and adjust their own policies and trade relationships. Creates friction.
We heard that even giants like Apple, known for their meticulous long-term planning, are still finding it tough to navigate this uncertainty.
It makes sense. These global supply chains are just so deeply entrenched. They represent massive investments, time, resources, relationships.
You can't just pivot easily.
No. While big companies like Apple definitely do extensive scenario planning, the sheer scale and complexity mean fundamental shifts are neither quick nor easy.
Yeah.
It also kind of underscores that governments themselves are still learning, learning about the intricacies and the vital importance of the tech sector in this whole evolving geopolitical picture.
So when we step back and look at the bigger picture, what do you think are the main driving forces behind these potential tariffs? What are the ultimate goals?
Well, analysis suggests there are probably three main buckets or motivations.
Okay.
First, maybe raising revenue through tariffs, though that's often debated how effective it is.
Right.
Second, national security. That seems to be the primary justification given for the semiconductor probes.
The Section 232 angle again.
Exactly. And third, the broader goal of boosting U.S. competitiveness and creating domestic jobs, maybe using reciprocal tariffs to pressure other countries on trade barriers.
We even saw that example of India announcing a big commitment to build out their AI infrastructure.
Right, $500 billion, I think.
Could moves like that be partly a reaction to these potential tariff pressures, wanting more domestic capability?
It's certainly plausible. Tariffs and just the general uncertainty around global trade, it can definitely act as a catalyst for other nations to invest more in their own domestic tech capabilities.
Makes sense. Hedging their bets.
Could be. India's AI plans could be seen as a strategic move in what looks like a more complex, maybe more protectionist global environment.
So it's like we have these two distinct tools being aimed at encouraging more domestic production now.
Which two?
The GPS Act, with its direct financial incentives, the subsidies,
Okay, yeah, the carrot.
and now these potential tariffs, which are more like market pressure, the stick.
Right, carrot and stick.
But it still feels like there are significant hurdles, like actually getting that CHIP-PS Act money deployed effectively, and the ongoing challenge of developing a skilled workforce here in the U.S. for these advanced manufacturing jobs.
Exactly. That's crucial.
Yeah.
Both subsidies and tariffs aim to encourage domestic production, but they work differently. And each has its own set of major challenges. The ultimate success of onshoring, it won't just depend on policy announcements. It's about the practical stuff. Effective funding, infrastructure, and crucially, having the skilled people ready to fill those roles.
So, okay, let's try and bring it all together. It sounds like we're on the edge of potentially significant new tariffs on semiconductor imports.
It is that way.
And that's injecting a lot of uncertainty, market jitters, tech companies forced to rethink global strategies.
Definitely reassessing.
The choice between higher costs of making stuff here versus the risk of tariffs on imports, it's a really tough one.
A major dilemma.
And all this is playing out against this backdrop of rising geopolitical tensions, which are increasingly shaping financial decisions, not just political ones.
Geopolitics driving markets more and more.
It definitely feels like policy in this crucial tech sector is still very much in flux, with potentially pretty far-reaching global consequences.
That's a very accurate, concise summary of a really complex, evolving situation. The potential for these tariffs truly raises fundamental questions about the future of global supply chains and ultimately the cost and accessibility of the technology we all use.
This whole thing really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Considering just how deeply interconnected the global tech industry has become, how profoundly and how quickly do you think these potential tariffs could actually reshape the landscape? The innovation, the devices we rely on every single day.
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe trillion-dollar now.
Oh, maybe. And what will be the real all-in cost of this reshored technology? Not just in dollars, but potentially the pace of innovation itself. It's definitely a lot to mull over.
Those are critical questions, and definitely ones for you, the listener, to consider. The long-term implications for innovation, consumer prices, the global distribution of tech capabilities, it's all still very much uncertain. It'll be fascinating to watch unfold.
Absolutely. Something we'll be keeping a very close eye on here. Thanks for navigating this complex landscape with me today.
My pleasure. Always interesting stuff.
For you tuning in, be sure to stay informed on this developing situation. Really ponder those broader implications for the future of technology and global trade. Thanks for tuning in to Byte-Sized Tech. If you enjoyed the episode, like, comment, share, and subscribe for more fun tech discussions.